Okay, so at this point we're ready to create the viewport. Now, if you haven't already done so, you should turn off your construction layer. Next thing you want to do is to click on the Layout tab. Click on Layout 1. If you remember in the very first video, we already set up the page for Layout 1. So you'll see this here. If for some reason you see a viewport or you see part of your drawing, you should click on the outside box that you see and go ahead and delete all that. The reason you want to delete it is because we're going to create it new right now. So what we're going to do in order to create a viewport is we're going to type View, Viewports, New Viewport, Single, OK, and then we're going to come down in this corner, and when you're down in this corner, you want to be, actually before you go down, before you do this, actually, turn off Object Snap, because that'll prevent you from snapping onto a corner. Come reasonably close to the corner, but you don't want to overlap the green. Hit your mouse button, and then go to the upper right-hand corner. And again, don't overlap the green. Finish your box and type Return. And look at that, lo and behold, the drawing immediately pops out and it's there. Well, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we put it in the right location. However, it is possible in a viewport to move what you're seeing around so that you can actually choose different portions of the model space to view in your drawing. So for instance, we could set this up so that we're only looking at one drawing. We're only looking at, let's say, the left-hand side, or maybe we're only looking at the right-hand side. Anyway, what do we want to do next? Well, let's first come up and click on this View ribbon here, and go ahead and select the viewport. Now remember, the viewport is not the green here. The viewport is actually the outline with this gray checkerboard pattern. Or sorry, the gray grid pattern. It's not a checkerboard. You should select the viewport. And then come up here. Again, I clicked on View. Not View up here in the File menu, but View on the toolbar ribbon here. We click on View, and then Properties. And when you look at the properties, when you come down here, under Miscellaneous, you'll see Scale. And the scale here is 0.5519. Well, one thing about drawings is we generally don't like to have crazy scales. So let's make this scale an even number. And when I say an even number, I mean 0.5. And that sounds like it's not an even number, but what it really is we're making this drawing half size. So if you remember, this paper that we set up is 8.5 by 11. And by setting up the scale to 0.5, that means that this 8-inch dimension will actually be 4 inches on this paper here. So that's where we get this dimension from, or that's why we get this scale. The 0.5 scale times 8 will tell us that we should be 4 inches here. Okay, so once you've done that, we can go ahead and close that out. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually hide the viewport itself. So to hide the viewport, we're just going to come down here to viewport in layers and turn it off. Right, so we've turned the viewport layer off. Okay. And for some reason, it didn't actually turn off. So let's try it from here. So layer control, viewport. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to actually turn it on. And then turn it off again. And then close this. And I'm not sure why it didn't turn off. But when it turns off, you should see that the grid actually goes away. All right, so we're going to skip over that part, I guess. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to adjust the dimension scale. And this is something you always have the ability to do. And that is, when you print a drawing, you might find that the dimension scale that you created in the model space is not very good to look at when you look at it in the paper space. So for instance, when I print this out, and I can show you this in a different way, if I come back to the model space, I can easily blow this up over here and look and notice that that's a 0.5. But if I print this out, someone's going to get this on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And now remember, the text height was, I actually don't remember, I think it was 0.15. So if we take a text height of 0.15, we plot a drawing at 0.5, so it's half size. That 0.15 text just went to 0.075. So we want to change that. And the way we change that is to go through and change the dimension scale. So in dimension scale, we can click right here. So under annotative here, let's back right out of that. Under annotation, click the downward arrow. Your dimension scales are listed here. So we're on the mechanical dimension scale. So I click on the dimension scale, and it opens up our dimension style manager. So it's the same thing as doing that format dimension style. It's no different, just another way to get to it. So we click modify. And first of all, under these primary units, if you notice, we just happen to pop up, and right in the middle of where we popped up, it says measurement scale. That's not what you're going to change. So we're not going to touch that at all. But while we're here, we are going to turn off leading zeros. So let's turn off leading zeros on this screen. And now let's go over to, let's see, our fit screen. And in our fit screen, we're going to change our dimensions to an overall scale of 2. And take a look what happens when I enter 2 here. All these dimensions get larger. So I can hit OK and hit close. And now all these dimensions get larger. And the reason we need to do that is, again, because they're half size when we shrink the drawing size. If you were printing this on a larger sheet of paper, you probably wouldn't have to do that because the drawing wouldn't be printed in half scale. Now, if you notice, and if you remember, we had this dimension here for the radius that was actually done not in the mechanical dimension, but I had you change to the standard dimension. So, to be fair and to be proper, we should modify this as well. So we should change the scale here to 2. And then again, turn off the leading zeros. And now we can see that that blows up as well. Now this text did not change. And I'm not quite sure of that because those are the only 2 scales we have here. So that may be on a separate text. Separate text setting. I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, one thing I want to show you is let's go back to the model. We go back to the model, and you can go back and forth between the model and the layout easily. Over here, the text also scales. The text also gets bigger. But you don't have a choice in that. So this 0.25 is actually, is the text bigger? Let's check that out. Let's see, R 0.25, R 0.25. Yeah, the text stays the same size from one side to the other, which makes sense. Okay, so this is sort of your first experience and your first setup with layouts. So now this would be ready to print. You could go ahead and fill out the rest of the information here. You could type, you could put your name in, you could drawn by, you put your scale. In this case, the scale would be 1/2 or 0.5. Now, other things you can do with this viewport is you can, as I said, you can expand it. You can click inside the viewport. And take a look. Once I click inside the viewport, you see the zoom menu pop in and the pan menu. Well, what does this allow you to do? Well, once you're here, if you use your mouse scroll bar, you can make this bigger or smaller. And you could pan. So, for instance, if I wanted to, I could move that off of the drawing. So we could only look at this drawing. Or I could move this over here so I could only look at that drawing. Of course, if you wanted to print these completely separately, you'd want this centered, right? Well, how would you do that? That looks kind of difficult. It's not as hard as you think, actually. Because what you could do is you could take your viewport and make it smaller. And once you make it smaller, you could then center this in your paper space. And now you can see how we could only look at one of the drawings. And it's quite easy. And again, if I double click inside, I get this, and I can go to my pan, and I could move this in instead of that, and I could expand it, and I can do other things. So this is how we play around, or how we're able to adjust and make changes and only print certain portions of a drawing. And you're going to see this when we get to the architectural, which I may have the first videos up in the next, by the end of this week, so by Thursday. And you need to do this because, for instance, your electrical guys don't necessarily want to see a drawing that the plumbing guys want. Your frame guys just want to see framing. So as you create a house, or it may have lots and lots of different prints, and you only want to give certain drawings to certain people. So this is how you can control that. Okay, so I'm going to quit this. Always remember to save. Of course, you should be saving this to whatever name I gave. I believe it's homework 8 dash gencam or dash gen, something like that. I'm going to save this to a new drawing, homework 8 dash 3 dash gencam, because I already actually I already have a 3. So homework 4 dash gencam, and that completes this drawing. I do apologize for this being set up late. I had to move everything over from my laptop over to my desktop computer, in part because it was really a difficult job to get everything done from my laptop. Using AutoCAD from the laptop for this format was tough, and I was moving monitors back and forth and cables back and forth, and I just got a little frustrated with it. So I finally went out and I got myself a speaker, excuse me, not a speaker, a microphone, so that I could actually start to use my laptop, because my desktop, so that I previously didn't have a microphone. Now I have a microphone, I can do that. Okay, so hopefully I will see you guys, or hear from most of you guys, or some of you guys, on Tuesday and Thursday this week in class. Remember, we only have 2 weeks of class left, followed by the last week of class. I'm not exactly sure when grades are due, but I'll try to find that out and let you know by Tuesday. Take care.